Hello YouTube, hope you've been alright. Dan back again. I know it's been quite a while, been mad busy recently. That busy in fact, I haven't had time to have a haircut, as you can see. Looking a bit scruffy today, aren't I? But today I thought I'd do a really quick video just to kind of run through something that I've seen quite a lot on the forums recently, and also it seems to be quite a common question in my inbox as well. And there's a lot of confusion and a lot of bullshit that quite frankly surrounds this as well. So I thought today I'd try and clear up a few points and also give you a little bit of advice on buying a classic Amiga model in 2013. Which machine would be right for you? What are kind of the pros and cons of each model, and which one is really worth buying and which ones are worth avoiding, really? As back in the day, Commodore did actually make quite a few variations of the Amiga, and some of these are more popular in certain parts of the world than others, so I thought we'd kind of run through quickly a few of the options that you've got and kind of, you know, what each machine brings to the table, really. Now, if you watch my videos regularly, you'll know that I don't usually script them. For this occasion, it's Easter Sunday. I've had a Jack Daniels and Coke. I thought I'd make a few bullet points just to kind of get some information out there, because I know this is going to be a bit of a controversial subject, and there will be people that will probably comment on this and say, you know, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with that, and there'll be things I forget otherwise. So I thought that I'd make a few bullet points. So we'll start at the beginning. The first Amiga, and we're talking the granddaddy of the range here, the Commodore Amiga 1000. Now, this was, as I mentioned, the first Amiga system. If you're a collector, this will be of interest to you. I mean, this is a machine that Jay Miner and the guys were designing back in 1982 with a bit of venture capitalist funding, and then, you know, trying to hawk themselves around Silicon Valley to Atari and Commodore, and, you know, we know the legendary story by now. And this is really the machine that, if you want to build up a complete collection or you're interested in, you know, legendary machines, the Amiga 1000 is definitely worth looking at. I mean, you can tell that this machine was considered a work of art by its founders. If you crack open the case, you can actually see all of the signatures of the original Amiga designers inside. So, you know, this wasn't actually called the Amiga 1000 to begin with. It was just the Amiga. This was a machine that, you know, the concept, it was, you know, the thing that was designed as the Amiga originally. So that's kind of the pros of it, really. If you're a collector, this is the original Amiga. It also comes in a very cool kind of low-profile desktop case with the signatures inside, as I mentioned. It's got quite a cool keyboard garage as well, which was quite a unique feature of the Amiga 1000. Now, the cons of the Amiga 1000, it's hard as balls to expand these days. Now, a baseline model usually only comes with either 256 kilobytes or half a megabyte if you're lucky, and it's got the expansion in the front of it, which really isn't enough to run any software released after, say, you know, 1987, really. It doesn't really benefit from being in a big box either, you know, even though it's a separate keyboard and desktop case. There is no internal expandability for hard disks or anything like that. You know, there's no real advantage. You can't put stuff like graphics cards or anything inside it, so you don't get any benefit from it in that respect. The ROM, the Kickstart ROM, is not actually held on a ROM, if that makes any sense. Basically, when you turn the machine on, you need to insert a floppy disk to load the ROM into memory before you can even use the machine. Which obviously, you know, these disks are 30 years old now, and, you know, unless you've got backups, it can be a pain in the arse to have to do that every time you know, turn your machine on. Also, it comes with an early version of the operating system. Typically, you'll get either Kickstart version 1.0 to 1.2 or 1.3 if you're lucky. It's very difficult to expand the memory or add a hard disk, for example. So my verdict, should you buy an Amiga 1000? My answer would be, typically, no. Avoid this model unless you're a hardcore collector. Now, the next machine that we'll come to is the Amiga 500. Now, if you know anything at all about the Amiga range, you'll know about the Amiga 500. Now, this was the most popular Amiga. They sold millions of these, particularly in Europe. It was really the best-selling Amiga model, and the first affordable one as well. I mean, it was the Amiga 1000 was retailing at around $2,000. When the 500 came out, typically it was around $600 when it first came out. So it was really the first machine that kids could afford in the bedroom, and, you know, people that didn't have a massive budget could afford at home. And also, it was kind of the baseline spec as well, because it became so popular. Most of the software that you'll get between, you know, 1987 and 91, 92 would have been designed with the Amiga 500 in mind. And also, if you had an Amiga back in the day, this was probably a machine that you either had or you're familiar with. So the pros of it, like I said, it was the baseline Amiga spec for the time. Also, if you add the 0.5 megabyte chip RAM expansion in the trapdoor, a lot of Amiga 500s actually came with this. So if you buy one today, you'll probably find that it's got a full 1 megabyte of RAM. Then you're talking the machine that most software was designed for. It comes with the original chipset and usually Kickstart version 1.2 or 1.3, which is very compatible, probably the most compatible for games of that era. The cons, as with the Amiga 1000, it's very hard to expand. There's no standard ports in it for media or RAM or anything like that. You're talking proprietary stuff all the way, really. So adding stuff like a hard disk or an accelerator or extra memory, you're going to need a sidecar expansion for them. Now, these are actually quite difficult to find these days, and when you do come across them, they can be quite expensive as well. I think recently I saw a 20 megabyte hard disk with about 8 megs of fast RAM inside it. So you're talking an expansion that plugs on the side of the Amiga 500 with a 20 meg hard disk and 8 megabytes of RAM. That's sold for nearly £300 on eBay. So if you want to upgrade this to anything beyond a standard config, it's going to set you back a fair bit of cash, and you're going to be hunting around for these expansions. So typically in Amiga 500 setup, you'll be using floppy disks only, which, is a pro and con in itself. If you want that authentic old school Amiga experience, if you want to experience the Amiga as you would have if you owned a typical model back in 1990, then the Amiga 500 is pretty close. Now, it doesn't come with a TV modulator, and the composite video output is only black and white on them as well. It only comes with a monochrome output, so if you're not going to use an RGB to, say, SCART adapter, you're going to need to find a TV modulator to give you the full colour composite or RF, which stick out the back of the machine. They're a bit ugly as well. So they're also pretty big machines as well. If you put it on your desk, particularly when you start adding things onto the side port, it can take up a fair bit of room on a bog standard desk. So I'd say, really, is it worth buying? Well, as I said, if you want that authentic Amiga experience, if you want to pretend like it's 1990 and that's a machine that you would have had, then yeah, go for it. If you just want an easy life and you want to kind of dip into what the Amiga was all about and have a bit of fun without the hassle, should you buy an Amiga 500? My verdict would be no. Avoid this model. And I never thought I'd say that on video. Next we come to the Amiga 500 Plus. Now this is an upgraded version of the Amiga 500. It comes with a slightly newer revision of the chipset and also a pretty decent upgrade to the operating system. It comes with Kickstart version 2.0. Now, for using serious applications, the operating system is a lot better. So if we're talking about the pros of the machine, it comes with version 2.0. You can have more chip RAM as well due to the new chipset. You can upgrade these machines to 2 megabytes of chip RAM, which will mean that a lot of games will give you a few extra benefits. You might get the odd new sound effect here and there, or a few new graphical effects that were quite common in a lot of games of the era as well. The cons of it, well, same as the Amiga 500 really, they're very difficult to expand. You're going to be relying on 20-year-old at least expansions that were made specifically for this machine. And also the Amiga 500 Plus came with an onboard battery. Now, it was one of those nickel cadmium barrel type batteries, and the problem with these is they are prone to leaking. So a lot of Amiga 500 Pluses that you'll find today, if they've been neglected, the batteries will have burst all over the motherboard and will have leaked out some nasty acid that will have corroded the tracks of the motherboard. This is pretty serious, which is why a lot of them are dead now if the batteries haven't been removed on time. So if you do end up buying an Amiga 500 Plus, top tip, get the case opened up and get that battery out of there as soon as possible. Now the next model is the Amiga 600. Now this gets a bit of flack. It wasn't really a very popular model among Amiga fans back when it came out in 1992, and it was pretty short-lived as well. A lot of people thought of it as a pretty pointless expansion. Now what it really was an Amiga 500 Plus in a smaller case with a few nice additions. Now over time, I think a lot of us have actually warmed to the Amiga 600, and these days I'd say buy an Amiga 600 instead of an Amiga 500. The pros of the machine are that it's got an internal hard disk interface. Now you can add an IDE hard disk, a 2.5-inch laptop hard disk inside the machine without any extra hardware. Or, what's even better, in 2013, you can add a compact flash card adapter or an SD card. So that means, for example, in my Amiga 600, I've got a little inexpensive adapter that cost me, I think it was about £5 off eBay. and then I put a 4GB compact flash card, like you get in cameras. I did that inside to it, which has now given me basically a 4GB hard disk at the cost of around £15. So it's really easy to expand them. And also they come with a PCMCIA port on the side of the machine, also known as a PC card slot, which means adding stuff like extra memory is simply a case of slotting in a card in there. You can add things like CD-ROM drives. There's also network cards that you can get as well, so you could put your Amiga online, add it to your local area network. You can also get things like a PCMCIA to SD card or compact flash adapter, which means you can transfer cards from your PC or your Mac over to your Amiga really simply by putting it in your card reader on your PC and then into your Amiga 600. Now, I've done videos on this subject. Check my history if you want to find out more. The cons of the machine are, well, it's pretty similar to the Amiga 500 Plus. It comes with the enhanced chipset and the version 2.0 of the operating system, which means you are going to get some incompatibilities with older software. Now, I should have mentioned this about the 500 Plus as well. There are a few badly written old Amiga applications and games that basically failed on the enhanced chipset and 2.0 models. So the 500 Plus and the 600 are not as compatible with old Amiga 500 games. Now, I personally think this has been exaggerated a fair bit. I mean, I remember reading back in the day in magazines that the Amiga 500 Plus and the 600 would fail on like 50% of Amiga 500 games, which I think is bollocks. It's not that much. In my experience, it might be around 5 to 8%. It's really not that much. And even then, you're only talking the older games, stuff before 1990, really. So I haven't found it's that much of a problem. And there are ways to get around that. You can get a downgrader disk, something like Reload Kick, that will soft kick an earlier version of the operating system, which will pretty much run 99% of the stuff. So you can get around that pretty easy. Also with stuff like WHD Load, which means you can put games on your hard disk or your compact flash card. That actually kind of soft kicks an earlier version of the ROM into memory as well, so that will get around most of the problems. It's a really small machine. It'll look great on your desk as well. It's a lot smaller than the Amiga 500. It also comes with surface mount technology as well, which means the chips are a lot more reliable. Now, another con that some people may say is it has no numeric keypad. I don't think it's much of a deal, really. A lot of people always dig out the old, a lot of flight sims need it. Yeah, there might be one or two, but really, it's not an issue most of the times. So, should you buy an Amiga 600? What's my verdict? I'd say if you want an original chipset or an enhanced chipset machine, the Amiga 600 is a better buy than the Amiga 500 in most cases. If you want to play the non-AGA games, most incompatibilities can be got around by soft-kicking the OS. It's small, it's compact, it's easy to expand to a degree, so definitely more so than the 500. So I think the Amiga 600 definitely on my list of machines to buy. Now next, we've got the daddy in my opinion, the Amiga 1200. Now, no qualms about this. This is my favourite Amiga model. Now, it was a next generation Amiga. It came out in 1992. It was really the real successor to the Amiga 500. It was the gaming platform of choice for Amiga fans of the time. It was the hacker's machine. It was the baseline spec from 1992 onwards, really. Now, it comes with the AGA chipset, which means you get more colours from a palette of 16.7 million, I believe. So a nice enhancement over the original Amigas. It's got a faster CPU than the 500 and the 600. Add a bit of fast memory to it, and you're talking a machine that's around 5 times quicker than the Amiga 500 here. It's really popular. A lot of expansions were made for it and continue to be made to this day. Companies like Individual Computers are still releasing RAM expansions, scan doublers, flicker fixers, accelerator cards. A lot of stuff was made for the Amiga 1200, so it's a very expandable machine. The cons of it are that the Amiga AGA chipset and version 3.0 of the operating system, again, you're going to get some incompatibilities with old software. But like I mentioned with the Amiga 600, this can often be got around by using stuff like WHD Load or by soft-kicking an early version of the operating system into memory. So it's not that big of a deal, really. Another thing is, it's quite an expandable machine, but obviously it comes in one of the all-in-one wedge cases, which means it can be a bit of a bastard to expand. A lot of Amiga 1200 users kind of ran out of room in the internal case and ended up actually transferring their Amiga 1200 motherboards into tower cases. So it can be a bit of a struggle to expand the machine if you want to keep it all looking tidy. But my verdict is, for the average user, if you want to dip in and you want to try out the Amiga's game library, it will run most of the original Amiga games with, a few software get-arounds here and there. It will run the enhanced Amiga software, the AGA games that came out after 1992, add a bit of fast RAM and maybe an 030 accelerator, which you can buy brand new for about £100. Stick yourself a 4GB compact flash card in there, put the newest version of the OS on as well, and you've got a really kicking Amiga setup. My verdict is the Amiga 1200, for most people, would be the best choice of Amiga to buy, so that is definitely a yes. Do not ignore the Amiga 1200. Now next we get to the big box Amiga models, the Amiga 1500, the 2000 and the 2500. Now these are all kind of the same machine really, just with slight variations. Now really what they are is an Amiga 500 in a big desktop case. Spec wise, exactly the same as the A500. You've got the 68K processor, usually around 1 MB of RAM in there as well, the original chipset or the enhanced chipset. The advantages really of the 2000 are that it comes in a hulking great desktop case. So that means if you want to add stuff like graphics cards, internal hard disks and CD-ROMs and stuff like that, you can do that in a really clean way. It also comes with Zorro slots as well. Now if you're not familiar with a Zorro slot, it's kind of the Amiga equivalent of an ISA or a PCI slot if you want. You can add expansion cards into it. So that's kind of the only reason that you'd want to get an Amiga 1500 or a 2000 if you want to expand it a little bit more. So the verdict for most people, they're not really machines worth bothering with unless you come across one cheap. They'll run pretty much anything an Amiga 500 will, just through in these massive ugly cases. Next on the list we've got the Amiga 3000. Now this is a really cool machine, it's a bit of an oddity. It also comes in a very rare tower version as well, but you're probably not that likely to run across this. Now specs wise, we're talking really an upgraded Amiga 500 Plus or a 600. Like those machines, it comes with the enhanced chipset, which means you get a few new screen modes. It's also got a faster 68030 processor as well at 25 MHz. It comes in a lovely case as well. Now these were really designed as workstations. They weren't for kids doing homework on or to play games, even though it will run most of the good Amiga games really. So the pros of the machine, it's a very slick design. The 030 CPU is a lot quicker. It's expandable. You can add graphics cards to it, accelerator upgrades, hard disks and all that inside it as well. It comes with a SCSI interface built in as well, which is pretty nice. The cons of it are it's got quite a low profile case for a desktop Amiga, so it can actually be a bit of a struggle fitting more than a couple of cards inside these machines. So my verdict on the Amiga 3000, for collectors only. Now next we come to the top of the range Amiga, the Amiga 4000 and the 4000T, T standing for Tower model. Now the Amiga 4000 is the top of the range, the powerhouse Amiga. Now it's got the AGA chipset, the next gen chipset like the Amiga 1200. It comes with an 030 or an 040 processor on board. Now really this is a machine for you if you kind of feel that you're outgrowing the Amiga 1200. Now it's got all the benefits of the A1200 apart from the PCMCIA port, but it does come with Zorro 3 card slots inside. So that means if you want to put stuff like a graphics card in there, maybe you want to put a PowerPC adapter in there as well, you want to get loads of RAM inside it, you want to get a big hard disk, a CD-ROM, and network cards, and Ethernet adapter and all that. You can put all of those inside. It will look nice and tidy in this nice PC style case that it comes in. So those are kind of the pros. I mean, it is it's a really expandable machine. If you want to kind of take your Amiga habit into kind of serious territories and experience a powerhouse Amiga, I think the 4000 is the way to go. Now the cons on it, as with the A1200, the AGA chipset and the 030, can mean a few compatibility issues with older software, and also again look out for the battery that's on board on these machines. It will leak and destroy the motherboard if it's not taken out of there in time. It's a very powerful Amiga. If you want a top of the range rig, get an A4000 if you can find one. Next we've got a couple of oddities in the Amiga range just to round off this video. The CDTV. Now I've done a separate video on this machine. It was originally designed as a home multimedia machine to be used in your living room, under your TV, alongside your VCR, to run CD-ROM titles with a remote control. Now this is kind of an Amiga in disguise. It was a wolf in sheep's clothing, if you like. It was really meant to get the machine into the living room so kids could look at encyclopedias and, that multimedia range it was all kicking off in the early 90s. It was a flop, but essentially it is an Amiga 500 in a hi-fi separate case, if you like. Now, the CDTV titles are not really worth looking in. There isn't really that many titles of interest today. You can expand it into an Amiga 500, though, by adding a floppy disk drive and a mouse and keyboard to it as well. Now, really the only pros of this machine are, if you've got an interest in the early Amiga CD software, if you're into kind of obscure platforms, and it looks slick as hell. If you look at an Amiga CDTV setup with a black keyboard and mouse and the black monitor, it does look the bomb. I'll give it that. It's probably the best looking of the Amiga range. Cons are, it's even more difficult to expand than the Amiga 500. So if you want to take it any further than the baseline spec, it's going to be a lot of messing around. Finally on the list is the Amiga CD32. Now, this was the final Amiga that was released by Commodore in 1993. And it was basically an Amiga 1200 in a Sega Mega Drive style case. It was an out-and-out games console. It ran with a double-speed CD-ROM drive. No keyboard, no mouse, no floppy disk, any of that. It's interesting if you want to play some of the Amiga CD32 games that came out. Now, most of these are ports of Amiga games, but often they had some nice upgrades like, full speech, extra music tracks, or some improved animation. But this day and age, it's worth buying a Amiga CD32 because it's got S-Video out, which means you can hook it up to most TVs that have that input and get some really good output out of it. You can also put it in your living room, play with the controller, and you can also download some really neat collections of Amiga games that you can burn onto CD-ROM. There's a few of them out there, like the CD444 888 packs as well. So what you do, you download these off torrents, for example, and then you burn them onto a CD-ROM, put it in your CD32, load it up, and you'll be greeted with a menu with 300 or 400 Amiga games, all of which you can play directly from the CD. So that's definitely a pro. It looks great in your living room. It's nice and compact. If you just want an out-and-out games machine, it's definitely worth bearing in mind if you can find one for a decent price. Cons of it are, if you want to take it any further than the baseline spec, you're going to be paying a fair bit of cash. To get a hard disk in there, or any more memory, or an accelerator, or RGB output, or the standard Amiga ports, you're going to need either an SX1 adapter or an SX32. Now, often these sell on eBay for like £400. They're very rare, they're hard to find, so it's going to be quite difficult to expand it into anything more than what it was originally designed to be. So there we go. Hopefully that's answered a few of the questions. It's a question I must get asked about 3 or 4 times a week. I want to get back into the Amiga. Which model should I buy? So there you go. Hopefully that's cleared up a little bit. Maybe you've got a bit of a better idea of which Amiga you should buy. Really, I'd say for most people, as I did earlier, the Amiga 1200, if you want a bog standard Amiga that you can play most games on and use most software on. If you want an Amiga that you can expand a bit more, go for the Amiga 4000. The rest of them are really just curiosities in this day and age, in my opinion. I'm sure there'll be people that will disagree. If you've got your own thoughts, leave a comment below. You'll also find my Google Plus and my Twitter links if you'd like to follow me. And hopefully I'll see you soon.